Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more and you would be an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me as always, Mr. Lewis Gamley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Good to see you as ever. How's things?
Yeah, not bad at all. We are recording a day late. I do apologise. That is entirely my fault. Work is still a nightmare, but we're in a much better position now, Lewis. And this podcast will be coming out on Black Friday. Hooray! Yay! Such big fans of Black Friday. Yay! Yeah. Anyway, enough about that, Lewis. Let's talk about some video games. What have you been playing this week?
Well, Mark, similarly to you, my work situation last week was pretty intense. I had to work a bit of the weekend doing some events, but I now have some days off. And with those days off, I've more or less only been playing Bloodborne, Mark.
Yes, exactly how days off should be spent, Lewis.
Yeah, I really appreciated having a couple of days to just really dedicate to it. And it's probably the longest I've sat in front of my PlayStation for a good long, possibly months in terms of like the hours that I've just sat and had a full session, which has been great. And Bloodborne feels like the perfect game to do that because once you get into that rhythm, it's really good. And you don't want to,
definitely,
you
man.
really don't want to stop when you're in that rhythm. You want to keep pushing your luck and trying another challenge, another boss, whatever it is. And so yeah, I'm now at the point, I'm glad to say, that I have basically beaten the base game.
Yes, man.
Other than the very final kind of pair of bosses for the true ending. And the reason I've not done them yet, partly is that we're recording this right now when I could have been continuing on to finish it, but also because, as we discussed a little bit off air, I have decided to go and do the Old Hunters DLC.
Yes, a very, very good decision, Lewis.
Yeah.
And I do have to say, I have let Lewis go past his deadline for beating this if he plays the DLC, because the DLC is fucking awesome, and frankly, he should play it, as should everyone who plays Bloodborne. Should go and play the Old Hunters DLC because it's fucking great.
Well, this is all I've ever heard about the Old Hunters DLC, really, is that it's a selection of really incredible bosses and some of the best DLC essentially ever put out in gaming. And I very rarely actually bother playing a lot of games DLC, even games that I've really enjoyed, because usually by the time it comes, you've just moved on. So I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into this. I mean, I've really played the last third of the game in the last couple of days. I remember you saying something similar to this, Mark, back a year ago when you were playing it, which is that obviously the stronger you get as the game wears on, the easier a lot of things seem, and actually some of the environments around the final bosses have been far harder than the bosses themselves have been. And so I'm quite looking forward to now jumping into the DLC and hopefully finding some, by all accounts from what I've heard, especially from you, some really difficult and challenging boss fights and some really good boss fights within there.
They definitely are. Yeah, don't take on the DLC until you've basically finished the main game is what I would recommend. I would also argue as well that easily 3 of the top 5 boss fights in the entire game are in the DLC.
Yeah.
Like, that is how good I think the DLC for this is. It is almost essential to me that if you're playing Bloodborne, you play the Old Hunters DLC because it's just fantastic.
Yeah. So that's essentially where I am. I'll still be playing it for the next wee while, but as you say, Mark, I'm not under that time pressure to get it finished by the Game Awards, which I was before. I mean, I might still manage that depending on how many hours.
To be honest with you.
I might take the foot off the pedal a little bit, and I need to give our PlayAlong game Pyre a bit of time this week as well. But yeah, I'm loving it. I'm so glad that I've been playing it. I'll maybe wrap up my final thoughts once I've played the next. I mean, I'll probably still be playing it next week, so don't think you're off the hook yet, listeners. But
more Bloodborne chat with Mark and Lewis.
But yeah, I'm really happy with it where I am at the moment. So yeah, what have you been playing this week?
Well, Lewis, it has been more Deathloop. I have to say, the story is becoming quite interesting. I think that there's still a lot for me to learn in it. The way that it's done is basically by finding notes and things like that. Not sort of dissimilar to Bloodborne, I suppose, where a lot of the story is come through items that you pick up, whereas this is more directly done through notes and whatever. It's not quite like Bloodborne. I don't really want to draw too much of a comparison there, if I'm honest. I have to say that I think that the actual gameplay is really good, like really good. It's varied. You can generally take on whatever level is thrown at you in a great variety of different ways. Your loadouts allow you a lot of versatility, and you can do a lot of things within the game itself because of that. I have to say it's probably one of the best FPS games I've played in quite a long time, to be honest. Having said that, I have to admit, it is missing a bit of magic for me. If I'm
really?
Completely honest. Yeah. Like, it's a good game, and I'd really recommend anyone go and play it, basically, like, if you can. And it's also hard to, like, pick any sort of real flaw with it. It's just not blowing me away. One part of it, I think, is that it really doesn't feel very next gen at all.
Okay.
And as a PlayStation 5 exclusive, like, I thought it would feel that way, or it's on PC as well, but as a console PlayStation 5 exclusive, I was expecting it to feel a bit more next-gen-y. And in the context of the Game Awards, I mean, it's just been announced that Deathloop has the most nominations at the Game Awards this year. I would really, really struggle, like, having played it now as well, and having played Returnal, which was pretty much snubbed, particularly from Game of the Year, but snubbed quite a lot. I think that Returnal, in a lot of ways, is a much more interesting, much more innovative game, really, than Deathloop is. Like, I am enjoying my experience with Deathloop, definitely, but it's one of those things that it's not really grabbing me the way that something like Returnal was, or the other Game of the Year games have, that I think is worthy of that award, you know? Which I think sort of maybe speaks to the fact that this has been a little bit of a down year overall, and maybe we can debate about that, because I know that you have slightly different feelings about that. But for me, I feel as though it's been, like, slightly a wee bit of a down year compared to other years, and I think that in the context of global pandemic, that's completely reasonable, to be completely honest. But yeah, it just lacks a wee bit of magic. Do you know what it is, Lewis? Like, see, at the end of the night, there are certain games that I'm like, oh, I really need to go to bed now, I have to stop playing this game. Whereas with Deathloop, I'm sort of like, oh yeah, okay, we can stop now. And it's not because the game is in any way bad. And again, I would highly, highly recommend it, to be honest, to basically anyone, because it's a very, very accessible game in a lot of ways. It's an FPS. They're very straightforward to play. It's very intuitive, do you know what I mean? And it's a really interesting FPS in itself. But I just, I don't know. It's missing a wee bit of a spark from me, if I'm completely honest.
Wow. Well, I'm really interested to hear that, and in some ways you've made me want to play the game even more just from saying that, just to kind of see if I feel the same. I mean, I think that's a fascinating take on it, and I can't say that I've seen or read anything that makes me immediately think, no, you're wrong, because here's the thing, here's the magic that I've heard about, you know, from the reviews and stuff like that. I'm similarly really excited to play it and really looking forward to it, but there hasn't been anything that I've looked at it and thought, well, you couldn't have done that on PS4 or on the previous generation. And there's very little about it that, you know, other than it being maybe a refinement of Arcane's whole, you know, their whole approach to game design that they really cracked with the Dishonored games. I've not heard anything that's like, and here is why, flag in the ground, it is the best game of the year. There's just really strong reviews. It did really well, but I'm totally intrigued by that, and I think your it's time to go to bed barometer is probably a more useful review factor than like numbers or stars, to be honest, because that's like how we all actually experience games a lot of the time.
Yeah, certainly how I experience games. As I said, Lewis, like, it is a good game. You will enjoy playing it. I'm just thinking, like, is this really what I would call the game of the year? I'm sort of like, no, like, not for me anyway. Maybe for other people it will be, but yeah, it's just lacking a wee bit of spark. I do have to say, what it's doing with the sort of loop mechanic is really quite interesting. I think last week I was sort of comparing it more to a roguelike, which I suppose it is in theory a bit like a roguelike, but in practice it's really not. It's really not a roguelike, to be honest. It's doing its own thing. So in that way it does sort of deviate from Returnal, but I think in a lot of capacities actually Returnal was a better game, a much more innovative, much more interesting game that just hasn't got the love a little bit less, to be honest. But anyway, I don't really know why I'm comparing these two games. They are quite different. It's just like, that's the one that got in and that's the one that didn't, you know, and the Game Awards has been looming heavy over us right now, I have to say. But that's my thoughts on Deathloop. To be honest with you, I'm only probably about halfway through the game, maybe slightly more, so I'm perfectly willing to have my mind changed as I continue going through it. As I said, I am enjoying it. I'm looking forward to going and playing it after we finish recording this podcast. You know what I mean? It's just like, it just lacks a little bit of magic that I thought that the next gen exclusive title would have brought, you know. But anyway, it's very, very good and I would recommend it, but maybe not Game of the Year.
We'll need to have a wee magic check-in next week then, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. Anyway, Lewis, I think it's time for the news. Alright, let's news item number 1. And very predictably, there has been more shit at Activision. So last week we spoke about the fact that there was a Wall Street Journal article published that accused Activision and CEO Bobby Kotick of being aware of multiple sexual misconduct allegations and withholding those allegations from his board, including instances of rape, and actively covering for higher-up employees accused of sexual misconduct. He was also accused of mistreating several female employees himself, including making death threats. Subsequently, the head of PlayStation, Jim Ryan, the head of Xbox, Phil Spencer, and the head of Nintendo of America, Doug Bowser, have all condemned and criticised Activision and their response to the sexual harassment allegations. In an email to PlayStation employees, Jim Ryan said that they immediately reached out to Activision to see what they planned to do regarding the allegations, then said, "We do not believe their statements of response properly address the situation." He also said that the leadership at PlayStation were disheartened and frankly stunned to read that Activision had not done enough to address the deep-seated culture of discrimination and harassment. Following this, Phil Spencer said in an email to Xbox staff that the leadership there were disturbed and deeply troubled by the horrific events and actions at Activision. Spencer also said that this type of behaviour has no place in our industry and that he was evaluating all aspects of Xbox's relationship with Activision Blizzard and making ongoing proactive adjustments. Then Doug Bowser said in an email to his employees that he finds the accounts distressing and disturbing. He also said that Nintendo have been in contact with Activision, have taken action and are assessing others, although it's not clear what those actions are at this point. Since the Wall Street article was published, Treyarch co-head Dan Bunting has left the company after reports he sexually harassed a female employee. The incident happened in 2017, a cool 4 years ago. Apparently, after an investigation then, Activision HR recommended Bunting be fired, but Bobby Kotick blocked his termination, but instead imposed other disciplinary measures. So he obviously done enough to be disciplined, but he decided not to sack someone for sexually harassing an employee and gave him a slap on the wrist instead. That is what happened there. It has also emerged that Jen O'Neill, who recently stepped down as the co-head of Blizzard after only 3 months, taking the job after J. Allen Brack left the company after this sexual harassment stuff all kicked off. It was revealed that she was being paid less than her male co-head counterpart. She had apparently multiple times asked for their pay to be equalised, all of which were rejected. She also apparently said in a letter to Activision's legal team that she felt tokenised, marginalised and discriminated against. Apparently she was only offered equal pay after she tendered her resignation, so obviously they felt as though she was worth that pay. They just weren't willing to give it to her to protect their bottom line, or to make their bottom line look better, which is just absolutely outrageous. Even the optics of that situation, Lewis, you bring in this woman who's supposed to be there to help stabilise the studio, put her in a co-leadership position, and you don't pay her the same amount of money as the other co-leader. Absolutely fucking madness. So, what of Bobby Kotick himself, I hear you say? Well, he's still the fucking CEO, so very little's actually happened with him. Apparently, Activision held an all-hands meeting recently, which they answered pre-screened questions from the employees, and they confirmed to staff that their new shiny zero-tolerance policy on harassment would not apply to Bobby Kotick because they claim there is no evidence, but, you know, apart from all the evidence and the easily provable allegations that you could definitely find that evidence if you wanted to, but they're obviously not that fucking bothered. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, because Kotick very generously said he would be willing to resign if he can't quickly fix the cultural problems at his company. How fucking kind of him. What he obviously failed to notice, that his management and that he himself are the fucking problem. He is the problem, or at very least a very big part of it. There is now an internal petition shared by an employee group called ABK Workers Alliance, which is Activision, Blizzard and King, who make Candy Crush, and yes, that is still Activision, demanding the resignation of Bobby Kotick. That petition now has over 1,800 verified signatures. There's also a public change.org petition which now has 28,000 signatures, including mine, also asking for the resignation of Bobby Kotick. I also want to say that we are aware that as of today, and it came to light not long before we started recording this, to be honest with you, that there is a lawsuit being filed against PlayStation alleging gender discrimination and wrongful termination of a female employee. Right now, it does appear that there is only one woman suing PlayStation. Not that that makes it in any way okay or anything like that. It just might be an isolated incident rather than a sort of widespread cultural problem. Either way, I very much hope that PlayStation respond to this promptly and properly, or else they are going to look like massive fucking hypocrites here. But Lewis, on Activision, for me, it does seem as though at every available opportunity, Activision and Bobby Kotick had so many opportunities to do the right thing and just actively done the wrong thing. They do not care about their employees. They do not care about anything apart from their bottom line. Even if you have been sexually assaulted or raped, they don't care about you. They are only interested in their own jobs and their own fucking bottom line and their own fucking money. And it's disgusting. I've said it before and I will continue to say it. These people deserve to be in jail. A resignation, whether he's willing to do it or not, frankly, is too good for this guy. He has to be in fucking jail.
Yeah, God, the benevolent resignation is if that just solves everything and all is forgiven because you don't get
how
to
kind of him,
claim...
how generous of him to be willing to step down. Fuck him. Like, he shouldn't have the luxury of that choice.
Yeah, well, and similarly, you know, the money that he's continuing to rake in at the current moment and over the time that these allegations and these occurrences, these experiences have been happening, you know, doesn't deserve any of that either. And I think, see, if you strip away the actual horrible reality of this, you know, what these allegations are about and everything, as you said, like, they have made the same series of bizarre errors again and again. They keep making what is very evidently, and in the Jen O'Neill thing is the clearest example of it to my mind, the most wrong decision you could make in the scenario. Again, forget what is actually happening here and what this is all about, and just focus in on, here are supposed business leaders who are so good that the board and the investors are willing to go to bat for him over this situation, who cannot think that it might be appropriate when you're facing a sexual discrimination case or multiple sexual discrimination cases to pay the person who you've tokenistically put in place the same money as her male counterpart. I mean, if you're not a good enough leader and business manager to understand how terrible that looks and how terrible that is and how stupid it all is and how you're definitely going to be found out and mocked for it, then, you know, you can't trust them to fix the fucking tap, never mind the cultural problems that run through the company. And that idea, yeah, that Bobby Kotick, despite, as you say, clearly being the problem or a big part of the problem, he thinks that he can quickly fix what is ostensibly a cultural issue. You can't fix cultural issues quickly. That's not how it works. Like, and that is an attempt by someone to put out a fire. But cultural change takes lots of changes and lots of decisions and lots of time. And that really is not a process that can be led by someone who is not only being involved in it and like being in power when it's been happening, but is indicted. You know, he's part of it. He is part of the accused. It's not just that he happens to be the manager of a company where something bad has happened. He's part of the bad thing that is happening, quite a major part of it. So there's just no way that it can be fixed like that. It is great to see the platform holders come out and say what they've said, particularly in the case of Phil Spencer, which was a public message, I think, rather than just an email that's kind of gone to staff and come out subsequently. But, you know, praise to all three for saying it and for evaluating the relationships with Activision. I hope we see Valve do the same. I would like to see even the likes of Twitch and companies like that, if it's appropriate for them, to sort of comment on it, because it is one big ecosystem and they all make money from each other, essentially. But hopefully this is the start of a process that leads to his removal at the soonest opportunity.
Yeah, what I really want to see, Lewis, is if these people are willing to file criminal cases against these people, particularly Bobby Kotick, because absolutely fuck that cunt, but literally anybody here, like, that is what I really want to see, because, as I said, like, a resignation and some cushy bonus for going out the door fucking probably is too good for this fucking guy. The money that he's got is too good for this guy. He needs jail. He needs removed from society. As far as I'm concerned, he's a dangerous person. Fuck him.
Yeah, let's not put too much faith in the American justice system right now, though. I mean, it leaves a lot to be desired.
Well, that is true, Lewis, but that is probably a whole other podcast. All right, Lewis, news item number 2. Rockstar have issued an apology for the state of the GTA Definitive Edition launch, Rockstar have made this statement on their website.
Hi everyone. We want to provide an update regarding the unexpected technical issues that came to light as part of the launch of Grand Theft Auto The Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Firstly, we want to sincerely apologise to everyone who's encountered issues playing these games. The Grand Theft Auto series and the games that make up this iconic trilogy are as special to us as we know they are to fans around the world. The updated versions of these classic games did not launch in a state that meets our own standards of quality or the standards our fans have come to expect. We have ongoing plans to address the technical issues and to improve each game going forward. With each planned update, the games will reach the level of quality that they deserve to be. A new title update is on the way in the coming days for all versions of GTA, the Definitive Edition, that will address a number of issues. We'll update everyone as soon as it is live. In the meantime, it pains us to mention that we are hearing reports of members of the development teams being harassed on social media. We would kindly ask our community to please maintain a respectful and civil discourse around this release as we work through these issues. While one of the goals of the Definitive Editions was to allow players to enjoy these games on modern platforms for many years to come, we also understand that some of you would still like to have the previous classic versions available for purchase. We will be adding the classic PC versions of GTA 3, GTA Vice City and GTA San Andreas back to the Rockstar store shortly as a bundle. Additionally, everyone who has purchased the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition for PC from the Rockstar store through to June the 30th, 2022 will receive these classic versions in their Rockstar Games Launcher library at no additional cost. We will update everyone as soon as these are back in the Rockstar store. Once again, we'd like to thank everyone for their patience and understanding while we work through these updates to ensure these games meet everyone's justifiably high standards.
Okay, so firstly, if devs are being harassed in any capacity, that is fucking bullshit. Absolutely do not do that. While people are rightly pissed off about the launch of this game, at the end of the day, it is a video game and no one ever deserves to be harassed over a video game. That is bullshit. Do not harass people over a video game. Now that that is out of the way, the tone of this has annoyed me quite a bit, I have to say, Liz. They call these problems unexpected technical issues. Like, do they think we zip up the back? What are you talking about? You have an extensive QA department. You knew exactly what condition this game was in, and you chose to put it on sale anyway. Like, I fully believe that is what happened. They didn't care. And then they have the gall to say that they find these games special and that they are special to them. This game is a fucking product to them, and they've just proved it so much by this decision, I think. Because these games are genuinely special to a lot of people. They're very, very important in video games generally, in the history of video games. And to treat them the way that they've been treated here is absolutely abysmal. Secondly, they are bringing back the classic versions of the games to PC. My reply to that would be, great, that's very, very good. But, like, what about everyone else? Like, what about all the people that want it on consoles? Why aren't they getting the classic versions restored there? Like, why can't they choose to buy those versions of the game when this offering is so piss poor? You know what I mean? Also, by the way, side note, PC gamers out there, please, please, please take advantage of that, because I do not think that those versions of the games are long for this world. I think that when they get this sorted out to a level with which they are comfortable saying it's sorted now, those versions will be gone forever and they will be expecting you to buy this version, or they'll make you buy this version because it will be the only version. Thirdly, the day after this statement was published, they did release the patch that they were talking about, patch 1.02, which fixed over 50 issues. But, like, 50 issues, Lewis, over 3 games isn't a lot of issues. That's, in terms of, like, programming, I know that, like, just because one thing is wrong, thousands of things that might need to be fixed to fix that one thing, you know what I mean? Particularly across 3 games as well. Like, 50 issues across 3 games isn't a lot. When Cyberpunk were doing their, oh, look how well we fixed the game now, look at all these fixes we've done, it was like hundreds. There was hundreds of fixes, you know what I mean? And although I think that some of the issues have been fixed, specifically the rain thing, which I know was a big major problem within the game and something that has become a meme basically, are better. Like, they are far from perfect. Like, this game really needs a lot more work and it's just so fucking bad. Like, I do not understand why developers keep doing this. I cannot believe for a second that it has been worth it for Rockstar to bring out this game in this state. Its Metacritic scores right now, right, are 57 on PS5, 56 on Series X, 52 on PC, and 47 on Switch. The user review scores are all less than 1. They are 0.9, 0.6, 0.5, and 0.7 respectively. And I believe that I read that one of them, presumably the PC one at 0.5, is the lowest user review score on Metacritic ever They are being torn to pieces because of how shit this is, and rightfully so, because it's an embarrassment for these games.
Yeah, just to start there, it is an embarrassment for these games. You know, even when they were just rumoured and then when they were announced, we were both saying that it was exciting to have them back in this form.
It was exciting,
it would
man.
be
really exciting.
Really good to be able to play these absolutely iconic games, these revolutionary games in a lot of ways, on modern platforms and have them look and feel as good as, you know, they could do without being fully remade. But Rockstar have totally dropped the ball on this. They obviously farmed them out to another studio. They didn't do proper QA testing, or, as I sort of mentioned last week, it feels to me a little bit like they did know what they were about to put out, and they tried to hide some of that by not releasing...
They absolutely did that. Everything is screaming that.
By not releasing review code and not putting out proper videos of the games ahead of launch. Those to me are signs that they categorically did know. These aren't unexpected technical issues. These are technical issues that were seen and worked around by the marketing teams to make sure that people still bought the games. And that's kind of how this always works. I mean, you mentioned Cyberpunk there. It seems to be an almost constant case now of just put the game out, then back it up with an apology and a patch, and then keep apologising and keep patching for a little while, and then it'll either all have blown over and be fixed, or it'll be too far down the line and people will have moved on and it won't matter anymore. And I think that is a real disappointment. You know, you said there to PC gamers to jump on this, and they are getting the classic editions added to their Rockstar launcher for free, it seems, until June the 30th, 2022. Now, that to me feels like a cut-off for exactly what you were saying. Like, make sure that if you want these, you've got them by the middle of next year, because they're putting a date on it when they are going to stop, it seems, offering them for free to players who've already bought it. So if you want to play these games, if you want to relive the kind of memories that we had with these amazing games from back in the day, jump on it, make sure and buy them. And yeah, hopefully the classic editions, those original editions, will come to the console stores as well, because why should we be stuck playing these half-arsed versions of this? And the final point, I think, just to say, is that, you know, the 50 issues resolved thing, I mean, who knows how many issues there are or how they're counting all of that. It's unclear.
Thousands of fucking issues.
I think fundamentally here, and I watched that Digital Foundry video that we kind of talked a little bit around last week.
Oh, I'll link to that again in the show notes on PlayersToo.com. That was very well done. Although it did only look at one of the games, I have to say, but it was very well done.
It just looked at GTA 3, and I watched it after we'd recorded last week, actually, and that, I mean, it's fantastic, and it shows you, though, how some of the things that I think some people might be thinking of as bugs or things that need fixed are actually choices that have been made for this version, like the switch of engines, like how the atmosphere of the game has been affected by changes to its art style, and how some of the kind of AI rendering that they've used has changed things that people might expect to see from the originals in terms of how they look and how they feel. And so I don't think that this will ever necessarily reach a point where the likes of you and I will think this is a really faithful remaster of those games, because things about them have just changed because of the nature of doing it like this. And so I don't think there'll ever be a point where some gamers will log into this and look to play it and be satisfied, to be honest.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I probably agree with you. And see, to players that haven't played these games, who are maybe younger than we are, I swear to you, these were great. These were really, 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 really good games. And I played GTA San Andreas, like, not that long ago, and it held up all right, I have to say. Like, it's not that these games don't hold up for the modern day. They do, by and large. This is just dog shit effort to remake them. They are absolutely dreadful. They really are. It's so sad, because they are so important. They're so important, these games. Alright, list news item number 3. The Avengers Spider-Man DLC has launched, and perhaps quite predictably at this point, appears to be pretty disappointing. Apparently, the gameplay of Spider-Man within the game is, like, fine, but honestly, there have been a few people saying that it is also pretty unrefined, which is very odd, because you have a template for this. Just copy Insomniac. Like, they did it real great. Just copy what they did. Also, just seeing the videos, like the actual footage of Spider-Man in the game, like, you do forget how shit this game looks. It really, really does not look good. It never has. It's never really recovered from that, I don't think. The DLC, probably more importantly, has also come with no new story missions. So Spider-Man, from a story perspective, is just sort of there now. He's just sort of in the game with the gang. It should be noted that with the Kate Bishop, the Hawkeye, and the Black Panther DLC, they all came with additional story missions, which, apart from being the additional content the game desperately needs, it also just narratively justifies their existence in the world and in the game. It's just a very, very odd, stupid decision. It should be noted at this point as well that the Spider-Man DLC is a PlayStation exclusive, which probably goes some way as to explaining the reason why there was basically no additional content here. I do also have to say that, like, I know that the Spider-Man DLC only coming to PlayStation was, like, pretty controversial, but at the same time, like, people specifically bought that version of the game for this additional content, for this Spider-Man DLC. It was advertised heavily as well. Like, buy this on PlayStation, you get to play as Spider-Man, and you get very, very little in return for making that decision, and you've also been waiting for over a year for this DLC, and it's just so. There is also no new characters announced for the game beyond Spider-Man, and for a game that has been struggling to deliver content, it seems basically since day one, I think that is a pretty bad sign. At the time of this recording, there are less than 600 people playing the game on Steam, according to SteamDB, and I know that that is only a portion of the players, but I think that you can see that there is a bit of an issue here, and that it's not retaining players and it's not getting people back in to play it. Like, do you just think this is the end? Do you just think this is the end of the support?
I think we might be nearing the end. Yeah, there's quite a lot of disappointment around this. And just in case anyone isn't aware, Crystal Dynamics devs have previously said that there would be proper story content, cutscenes and that kind of thing for Spider-Man.
But there's not.
But there isn't. Yeah, and it seems the kind of story-ish elements are all delivered through like audio logs, which is just, you know, not really what you're looking for. That's just not good enough for what this seemed to be promising. And given that it's Spider-Man and all of that, it's a huge misstep, I think, from Crystal Dynamics and from Square Enix here. They've kind of seemingly tried to explain it by sort of saying that they put all their focus on this upcoming raid, and I think it might be Avengers' first raid, and you can see the logic there of that's going to be available for everyone. Spider-Man isn't, so we'll channel our resources here, and basically Spider-Man becomes a skin in the game, right? But as you said, Mark, like, people were kind of sold this game on the basis that they would be able to play as Spider-Man and it would be kind of a meaningful addition, like all the other ones have been that have come to the game since launch. And so all of it is just a bit muddy, a bit, you know, it sort of feels like, oh, we didn't really exactly promise you that, but we sort of did, but we're pretending now that we didn't, and hopefully this is good enough. And it basically isn't good enough, I don't think. I suspect this game will get a bit more support than just the end of this year, than just Spider-Man in this raid, but I think it's limping at this point, and I don't think, you know, if Spider-Man isn't going to bring anyone back, what other characters do they have that are going to really move the needle there? I think that they're all in it already, all the major players, so it's not a positive outlook from me. No, I have to admit, I probably agree. I do think that the days of meaningful support for the game are numbered. I mean, Square Enix have already themselves called it a disappointing and underperforming and all that, and it's just like, Jesus, the writing is very well and truly on the wall here. Alright, let's news item number 4. Dragon Age 4 Senior Creative Director Matt Goldman has mutually agreed to part ways with BioWare. This has subsequently been confirmed by EA, who said that he has left the next Dragon Age game in excellent hands. Goldman originally took over the Senior Creative Director role in 2017 after early work in the game was scrapped, and the entire game was basically rebooted and was going in a totally different direction from that point. The game was first announced at the Game Awards in 2018, but since then, in 2019, Jason Schreier wrote a huge piece on Kotaku basically saying that the development process was not going well, we will say. And then subsequently, Mark Dara and Casey Hudson both left BioWare in December last year. These two, particularly Hudson, were probably the top two creative guys at the studio from all accounts. So, Lewis, what do you make of all this? Are we looking at another Anthem here? Because I'm getting real Anthem-y vibes from it. Yeah, it does seem a bit like it's in development hell, and yeah, who knows where this is going to land ultimately. I hope that this change is happening for, you know, good reasons for everyone involved. It has that kind of air of a problem to me because it's sort of a bit sudden, and it's suddenly by mutual consent the guy's away, and, you know, we're moving on from that. Hopefully it's all good in that sense, but for the game, yeah, it's already been rebooted. It's already sort of been expected before now, or at least more information about it's been expected. It seems now that we're not likely to get anything for a while because you've got to assume that things are off track at the moment. I don't know. I hope it's not another Anthem situation for BioWare, but yeah, they're kind of struggling here, right? They're struggling to get it over the line. They're struggling to make this an exciting proposition. It feels weighted down by problems at the moment. I don't have a lot of high hopes for this.
No, and I think that that's totally reasonable. When we report on stuff like this, when a creative lead has left a project, it's never good if they're in like the middle of a project, I don't think, but that in and of itself doesn't necessarily indicate that there is something wrong here. But I do think that there is wider information here that is suddenly saying, oh, do you know what, this could actually be indicating that there might be reason for concern, and I do hope it doesn't turn into another Anthem, because that would really be pretty devastating for BioWare, I think. Alright, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl have come out this week. This is the remake of the original Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Currently sitting with a 76 on Metacritic, which might sound a little bit low, but probably about right for a game that is effectively 15 years old. Basically, the game seems to be very much faithful to the source material, and I think the reviews largely depend upon whether or not you think that is a good idea and whether or not you like the kind of chibi art style that they've decided to go for with the game. Personally, I don't mind it at all, if I'm completely honest. Ultimately, I think that this is probably the best way to play these games these days. I continue to hope that Nintendo will remake the old ones, because honestly I think that is more likely to draw me back in than playing some of the new games, because after playing Sword and Shield I was just like, this maybe isn't for me anymore. But I still occasionally go back and play Pokemon Red or Blue or Pokemon Gold and Silver, and I do enjoy those experiences, so I'm sort of hoping that this will draw me back in rather than the new games. And Arceus, we're still got our fingers crossed for that, but who knows? Who goddamn knows? Alright, let's shout out number 2. The new Call of Duty Warzone map has been delayed a week and will now release on December the 8th. If that date sounds familiar to you, that's because it is the same release date as Halo Infinite, which is a real ballsy move in my opinion by Call of Duty, frankly. This also comes after news that Call of Duty Vanguard had the lowest sales at launch of any Call of Duty game in the past 14 years, dating all the way back to the original Modern Warfare. Apparently, Vanguard is down 40% year on year versus Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. It also comes after the Halo Infinite multiplayer launched the same week as Battlefield 2042, which was very much a decisive loss for Battlefield, I have to say, when the two went up against one another. So I'm not really sure Call of Duty is going to fare much better, if I'm honest. Like, what do you make of this? I know that it's the Halo campaign and not the multiplayer. The multiplayer is already there for everyone to be playing, but I just feel as though all the buzz is going to be around Halo and not Warzone.
Yeah, I basically completely agree with that. It seems like a very strange thing to do. I suppose Call of Duty is gambling on the idea that a new map from them will draw that multiplayer crowd in on day one to get that kind of first-hand experience, whereas there's nothing particularly needed about playing the Halo campaign on day one, minute one. But yeah, all the conversation is going to be about Halo, even if actually the players are on the side of Call of Duty, which doesn't seem likely given those numbers you're reading there. Everyone's going to be talking about Halo. All the news is going to be about Halo. Halo is going to be I think, seen as the best first-person shooter game of this end-of-year period pretty comfortably, probably, by the way that people have reacted to the multiplayer. So, seems pretty odd to me from Activision to have moved this map to that date.
Just another dumb Activision decision, isn't it, Lewis? Alright, let's shout out number 3. Saints Row has also been delayed, this time for a bit longer. It has been moved 6 months from February the 25th to August the 23rd. Volition CEO Jim Boone said in a statement, quite curtly I have to say, that they underestimated the impact of the pandemic on their schedule, which is quite nice to hear someone like that admit, I have to say. He also said that he wanted to give devs a generous amount of time to basically polish the game and make it as good as it can be. So thumbs up there to Jim, I have to say, saying all the right things. But let's face it, Saints Row was supposed to be coming out on the same day as Elden Ring, so this game was moving regardless. But to be fair, it does seem as though there are other reasons beyond that they have decided to delay the game, adding layers of polish to it. There is nothing wrong with that at all. And in the long run, I think it's going to work in their favour, just moving out of that February release window and the day that Elden Ring was going to come out. Like, I think that is going to work massively in your favour.
Yeah, 100%. They had to get out of there. I'm glad that they've got around to announcing it now. So, yeah, good luck to them when it actually drops.
Definitely. A lot of people are excited for it, so I hope it does well. All right, let's shout out number 4. Kojima Productions has launched a new film, TV and music division, all of which will be based out of a new Los Angeles division of Kojima Productions. The studio will be led by ex-PlayStation veteran Riley Russell, who was at PlayStation for 28 years in various roles, including Chief Legal Officer and VP of Business Affairs. This, Lewis, seems to be the latest in a recent boom of video game IP, or just video game personnel, I suppose, getting involved in other media, specifically TV, but also movies and now music, it seems, as well, with Kojima. And in fact, today I was reading that Amazon are apparently nearing a deal to make a Mass Effect TV show as well. Like, what are your general thoughts on this sudden boom of video games going into other media?
I mean, I think it makes sense, ultimately. I mean, these are pre-written stories that TV companies and film companies and whoever else, other directors and creators, can kind of come and borrow and use and shape, and there's a ready-made audience. So the stars have aligned on all of that. Ultimately, generally speaking, they're terrible and they don't work very well.
They've not been given the love and attention they deserve, I think, in a lot of
and
cases.
I do have high hopes for the HBO Last of Us series for various reasons. I think if anything is going to buck that trend, it will be that. For this one, I mean, Kojima going into music is an odd one. I don't know if that means he'll be making it himself or just like publishing other artists, but you know, I think the thing about this story is that Kojima genuinely is interested in music, film and TV. He tweets about them all constantly. If this means that he'll be involved in some way in helping other artists get their stuff out, or even producing films or TV shows, whatever, that's great. Obviously, we know there's a Metal Gear film in the works that is not being done as part of this, so anything TV or film related will only be based on Death Stranding or new IP, I suspect. But it's cool. I'm not going to hold my breath. I want some real Kojima news, i.e. some gaming Kojima news pretty soon, but maybe that's coming up at the Game Awards, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, me too. That would be very, very good. I don't really want to see Kojima's next film anywhere near as much as I want to play his next game.
Exactly.
All right, listen, final shout out at number 5, and this is just a PSA for Black Friday, which is the day this podcast will be coming out. And I think a lot of people, particularly in video games and tech space generally, need to hear this. Like, a lot of stuff that claims to be on sale absolutely isn't, versus other points in the year where its price was probably lower, if not as low. I understand that people are rushing to get stuff for Christmas, but like, please don't be drawn in by like fictitiously low and massive air quotes there prices. If you don't need something, don't buy it. Don't buy into the hysteria of Black Friday, particularly around video games, because there's always a lot of shit deals, frankly, on video games and just around tech in general. Most big companies also have like price trackers that you can use to make sure that you're actually getting a good deal. For Amazon specifically, I use the Chrome extension Keepa, which is Keepa. It's a Chrome extension and it's just fantastic. Like, but even if you don't use Chrome, the website Camel, as in camels from the desert 3 times, is also like a website that you can go to just to track Amazon prices, and it's just so useful, and it really shows you that a lot of the time that deal really isn't that good at all. It's just want to say to everyone, just like, be smart, don't get ripped off by buying shit that you don't need or don't even fucking want half the time because of a shiny price tag, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Be sensible about your purchases. You know, do browse the sales. There's a lot of sales on the gaming platforms at the moment, but particularly around hardware and tech and all that kind of stuff. Do your research and really consider if you actually need it before you make that purchase.
Absolutely. Not saying don't buy anything on the sale. Obviously, that is very, very dumb. Just make sure you're not getting ripped off. Make sure you are actually getting a good price. Anyway, Lewis, on that real downer, I think it's time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is Nintendo's Year in Review, Lewis.
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, so we are basically just finalising what became a bit of a mini-series around the 2 other consoles' anniversaries, as we've covered in the last 2 weeks. PlayStation 5 turning 1 year old and the Xbox series of consoles turning 1 year old. So it kind of made sense, not that there is a big anniversary for Nintendo this week, but just to talk about what the last year has been like for Nintendo as well, as we approach the end of the year. And I think more or less their big releases have all passed for the year as well, with the release this week of the new Pokemon remasters. So Yeah, we're going to dive into what Nintendo's year has looked like. As I've done with the other two, Mark, I'm just going to run through some quick numbers and headlines because I think that we both probably share a narrative about Nintendo this year. But Nintendo Switch is still absolutely killing it on sales.
Oh, yes. It
is still absolutely dominating when it comes to unit sales. It remains the highest selling console by units in the States this year. It is only once in 3 years not been the highest selling console month by month in the US. That was only in September did the PS5 manage to become the highest selling console that month. Then the Switch OLED released in October and Switch became the highest selling console by units and dollars that month again. It is astronomical how well this console is doing. It is up to something around 93 million units overall now since release. It is, I think, now about 10 million units away from the Wii, which, as we've said before, was a cultural phenomenon, which, you know, is one of the highest selling consoles of all time. Its sales this year are only 3% down on what they were at the same point last year, which, given that the incredible surge of Switch ownership that I think we saw in 2020, particularly around the release of Animal Crossing, it's remarkable that they're still in that position. And they've cut their sales figures in the last couple of months by 1.5 million for this year, but they're still expecting to sell 24 million units by March 2022, which, given that this console is 5 years into its life cycle and in the heat of not only a pandemic but a global chip shortage, which means that even manufacturing the fucking things is difficult enough, they are still selling like gangbusters.
Yeah, not to mention the launch of 2 new consoles in the space is just, it's remarkable what it's doing. It's absolutely remarkable.
But I think, to go back to what I said right at the top there, Mark, I think we probably both share a narrative that this has not been a particularly good year for the Nintendo Switch. Is that where you sit on things at the moment?
Well, Lewis, just before we started recording this, I ran off to get my Switch. Would you like to know what the last thing that I played on the Switch was?
Go for it.
It was the Nintendo Switch Online's NES games. The game that I played before that was the Nintendo Switch Online's SNES games. Then, working back, was Mario Kart. Then the Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which did come out this year, I believe, didn't it?
Yep, that's right, yep.
So that is the only one so far. But after that, again, was the Super Mario 3D World with the Bowser's Fury expansion as well. So I've played 2 games on my Switch this year that came out this year. Do you know what I mean? Like, even a lot of our play-along games and stuff like that we used to use our Switches for, I don't think that either of us really have used them for that at all. So yeah, I think that it has been a down year. And for me, really, it's felt like a couple of down years because unless you were on Animal Crossing, which I know a lot of people were, and a lot of people absolutely loved that, and fair play to you, that was not my jam. I know that it's not really your thing either, Lewis. So it feels like a couple of years back-to-back, Lewis, where game-wise, the Nintendo Switch really hasn't been there for me, you know?
I think that is the kind of key to this conversation, really, is that there's something lacking this year in what feels like major Nintendo releases. But actually, see, when you look at it, it's not been a terrible year, really. They had the Super Mario 3D World with Bowser's Fury. They had a couple of Monster Hunter exclusives, Monster Hunter Rise most notably, new Pokemon Snap, Mario Golf, Skyward Sword HD Remaster, Pokemon Unite, you know, that Pokemon MOBA that came out, which some people seem to really stick with. It was a WarioWare game, which definitely isn't for us. There was Mario Party Superstars, Metroid Dread, of course, the best performing Metroid game to date, it seems, and Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which is looking at the moment like it's somewhere around the 3rd to 5th best selling games in the series here in the UK. So I don't think that's a bad list of games, but I do...
No, certainly not. I just don't think that like anything's massive, like nothing's absolutely crushing it, nothing's absolutely knocking it out of the park. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of great games there, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this even have probably heard 1 or 2 games that are probably like, oh yeah, that was great, or that was great. Do you know what I mean? Dread, for one, is the one that's missing for me. I'm desperate to try and play that before the Game Awards. That, to me, I think could actually be the one that is like, oh yes, I cannot wait to play this on my Switch again, you know? But as of right now, the Mark sitting here in this moment is a bit like, not a lot of that's doing it for me, you know?
Yeah. Obviously, I played Skyward Sword and I really enjoyed it, but it's not my game of the year by any stretch. And there's a lot of games on this list that I'm keen to play, that I've talked about wanting to play, particularly everything involving Mario on that list, the 3D World of Bowser's Fury, the Mario Golf, less so Mario Superstars, to be honest. But
I can't believe you've not played Mario 3D World yet, man. That's right up your street.
I know, exactly. I just haven't got around to it yet, and I really do hope that Bowser's Fury is a bit of a tester for whatever's coming down the line. So that is one that I'm super keen to play. But I agree with what you're saying there, Mark. There's a list of games here that I'm like, these are all solid, but these are all games kind of that I'm quite comfortable getting to at some point, other than Dread. Similarly to you, I'm really keen to play Dread. If I wasn't playing Bloodborne right now, I probably would be playing Dread, you know. So that's the big standout this year. And I think even from the moment that was announced, like that first time we had that revealed, it felt like, oh, this is the Switch game for this year. You know what I mean? This is the fucking killer. So other than that, I think it's like a decent list. But I guess that takes me on to kind of one of my big questions for you there, Mark, is that I think we're reaching a point now where the Switch is feeling quite left behind by the other platforms, that even cross-platform games and third-party games, more and more of them are having to be streamed on the Switch. More and more of them are having kind of lesser and lesser quality ports to the Switch compared to what you can get on the other platforms. Are we just reaching the end of this life cycle? Is that what you think is happening here?
Yeah. Honestly, it's kind of, yeah. I thought that we would get a rejuvenation with the Switch Pro, quote unquote, which turned out to be the OLED Switch, which turned out to not be what we were all looking for, you know, which I'm sure you were going to bring up at some point, but might as well be now. Yeah, I thought that it was going to be rejuvenated with that, but yes, I think that the Switch hardware is getting, I mean, it wasn't even as powerful as the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox, you know what I mean? It was underpowered even for that generation, although it had done lots of different things, and I'm not even necessarily saying that was the goal, but I think that it is now looking quite tired in the face of modern consoles, and with the Steam Deck on the horizon specifically as well, the hardware that they've battered into that thing is just so impressive, and the games that it can run on a mobile platform is just incredible, like really unbelievably impressive, and I'm still really excited to get mine, despite the fact that it'll be quite a long time away now, unfortunately, due to the delay. But yeah, I think that Nintendo really have to be thinking about their next console, which we've recently found out that they are, but I think that they maybe have to be doing something quite soon, you know what I mean? We need a Switch Pro, we need maybe a higher quality of game on there, you know. And don't get me wrong, I know that Nintendo aren't necessarily looking for super high fidelity or anything like that. To be honest with you, the power of a PlayStation or an Xbox would be wasted on a lot of Nintendo IP, I would argue. But we still are maybe looking for something a bit more than what the Switch is currently offering us, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, like you mentioned the Steam Deck there, and I'm jumping forward in my list of questions quite drastically, because I think that the Steam Deck is quite a big part of the future of the Switch, really. So, you know, the Switch continues, despite the PS5 and despite the Xbox series of consoles, the Switch is selling crazy numbers. Nintendo don't really have to do anything or change anything to stay relevant or to come out on top or anything like that. You know, they're playing a different game and they're also succeeding in the old game.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
But Steam Deck might change things. What threat does the Steam Deck pose Nintendo in the short and long term?
I am not sure that it imposes quite as big a threat as people might think that it does, because a lot of what Nintendo do and what Nintendo is their IP. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how big or shiny or cool the Steam Deck is. It's never going to be as good at playing Mario, even if you can get a fucking emulator on it or anything like that, which I'm sensing is probably coming down the line for that hardware, to be honest. But I still think that the best place to play the new Mario game, the new Zelda game, the new whatever Nintendo IP you choose is going to be on whatever Nintendo's hardware is, you know? So I still think that it will sell well. I still think that it will do well. I think that for people like us who are more serious gamers, I don't really like to use the term hardcore gamers, it's a very wanky vibe about it, but for people like us, I think that if we both had Steam Decks, the Switch would then become a Nintendo exclusive machine, effectively, you know? Which, to be honest with you, I'm not against, but it used to be the indie machine as well. But unfortunately, the pandemic has meant that we don't travel very much, and a lot of the Switch's utility was in the fact that you could take it wherever you went. But for a long time, many people weren't going anywhere at all, and a lot of people still aren't. So I think that, and I know that you're the same, I've been playing like a lot of our PlayAlong games that are mainly indie games on the PlayStation, like on my home console, where I can get a better performance than the Switch, and it's just a better experience to do that. It just is, unfortunately, but I was given that up a lot of the time to be able to take it on the road, which was absolutely great for a lot of indie games, you know? And yeah, I think that for us, that is where the Switch will lose big time, because if we can get a much better performance on the Steam Deck than we can on the Switch for indie games and things like that, maybe smaller titles that we would ordinarily just play on Steam, that is where the Switch is going to falter, in my opinion anyway, for people like us, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. I really hope that Nintendo are looking into some marketing deals and stuff with some of the smaller indie games or the indie publishers like Devolver and Annapurna, because if they want to stay relevant in that space, they have to give us a reason not to be playing those games on Steam Deck rather than it just becoming a Nintendo machine, as you say. Just before we wrap up, Mark, I want to ask you about old games and I want to ask you about new games. The other big thing that happened with Nintendo this year was the expansion of the Nintendo Switch Online, quite controversially for various reasons. It jumped from about £18 up to £35 if you want all of the content now, which includes N64 games, includes some Sega games, which was kind of remarkable. Do you think that was good enough? Do you think that they should be doing more with that service?
I mean, I think that they should be doing more for that price point, yes, basically. I think that the jump was not as big as it seems, because I think that the initial Switch Online price point was just ludicrously cheap. Ludicrously cheap. So that jump does seem like a lot, but in reality it is still cheaper than both Xbox and PlayStation. But granted, it's not as good a service. Like, I understand the reasoning behind this, obviously, as well. I don't think right now that the emulation of the N64 games is proving particularly great, and I know that they've had to do a lot already to sort of get things into a working order on there, but I'm hoping that will come, and I hope that they continue to add to the service at that price point. I know that there's been a lot of talk about the fact that there would be Game Boy games coming at some point. I hope that they are just added to that service with no price change, frankly, because that would then be a further problem, frankly. But right now, I don't really think that it's a terrible offering. Right, I think a lot of people think that they're being ripped off, but in actual fact, I think it's actually pretty good overall on the whole. It's just like such a jump from that baseline.
Yeah, totally.
20 quid or whatever it was, less than 20 quid, I think it was.
Yeah.
Up to 36 or whatever it was, you said, just because you might want to play an old Zelda game, like, doesn't really compute in my head. You know what I mean? I don't think a lot of people are seeing the value in that for them right now. I do hope that they continue to add to that service, because ultimately, if they do start adding a lot of old Game Boy games and whatever, and you can just subscribe to basically Nintendo's back catalogue, that would be fucking awesome. Like, I'd be really into that. But we'll see.
Yeah, that would be the key. Something that gives you access to their historic content and just a bit more communication around that to tell us there's stuff coming every couple of months. That would be
Nintendo famously not talkative on situations like this, aren't they?
And one final one, Mark, looking to the future. I'm going to list a couple of games here and mention one piece of hardware. And I want to ask you, will 2022 be another banner year for Nintendo in much the way that something like 2017 was? Games coming up that are either due to come out in 2022 or are rumoured to be include Pokemon Legends Arceus, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Splatoon 3, Triangle Strategy, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, sequel to Breath of the Wild, and Bayonetta 3. I also want to chuck in there that there's surely got to be some news of a new Mario game coming soon enough, and the long-rumoured Switch Pro alongside probably Breath of the Wild. Do you think it's going to happen, any of that stuff? Are they going to hit those dates? Is next year looking bright for Nintendo, or do you think that this is all going to move?
I mean, I think some of it's going to move, to be honest, but I really hope that Breath of the Wild 2 specifically makes it there. I do not genuinely think that we will be seeing any new Switch hardware for a few years. Basically, I think that we'll get a new console now rather than getting a Switch Pro. So no, I don't expect that, which means that we will basically be expecting more Breath of the Wild, which is certainly no bad thing, but you won't be seeing any great performance.
Yeah, a revolution,
boost, frankly. Yeah, no revolution, exactly. Yeah, I think that that's setting up to be a really, really good year. I'm not sure it's quite as good as 2017, because 2017 was just nonsense.
Yeah.
But I do think that that's setting up to be a very, very good year for Nintendo. If those things can hit their dates, yes, that will be a very good year for Nintendo, and I hope that they do, because I want to play a lot of those games lists.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to compare next year to this year, I just want more time on my Switch. I want more reasons to be there, and that list of games would certainly give it, hopefully, if the hardware stuff comes along as well, even more reason to jump in. But the games are the thing, and this year's been maybe slightly lacking, and next year looks pretty strong.
Yeah, it definitely does. And maybe with the easing of restrictions around the world, maybe the utility of the Switch comes back a little bit as well, and maybe we can get to playing it more, which is exciting, because I do want to be playing it. I definitely want to be playing it more, like you. Anyway, Lewis, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over on PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot, and you are an absolute legend to us. As Lewis mentioned at the top of the show, our play-along game for this month is Pyre. I have actually started it a little bit, Lewis,
nice.
And I've got to say, I've got thoughts.
Okay.
And I'm very excited to talk about them, I have to say. Very excited to talk about them.
Yeah, I'm going to get started now that I've kind of done something in Bloodborne that I feel I can step away from it slightly and play some Pyre, so that's definitely next on my agenda.
Nice one, man. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.